More than 40% of the population is involved in food production. As a launchpad for the bioeconomy, this should be a solid foundation, and yet Africa derives less than an estimated 10% of the final value of this biomass. And that's really the reason why we are here together, to see how we can change this. This session will explore some of the challenges for biomass value chain development in Africa and seek to identify opportunities and next steps for deriving greater social, economic and environmental benefits. Recently, the G20 initiative on bioeconomy took place here in Pretoria. It reaffirmed the bioeconomy as a driver for sustainable growth. It highlights the next steps in the bioeconomy development with special attention for the African case. Therefore, a general introduction to the bioeconomy in South Africa and the continent will be followed by select presentations on the bioeconomy value chain and opportunities from primary production to market access, exploring how Africa can valorize both its biomass and its biodiversity and bring about sustainable development. A panel discussion by the presenters will seek to define a general statement to the COP30 on how the bioeconomy can fuel sustainable development with benefits for the local people and the planet. This statement will further be shaped on the 7th of November at the Brazilian-Belgian bioeconomy event in Rio de Janeiro on the eve of the COP30 in Belém, where on 10 and 11 November the bioeconomy will be discussed in the permanent bioeconomy working group. In order to start, we will listen to the sustainable bioeconomy scene in South Africa and the continent, the G20 Vision for Development by Ben Durham. Ben is Chief Director Bioinnovation at the National Department of Science, Technology and Innovation in South Africa. His responsibilities include the implementation of the South African bioeconomy strategy, the ultimate purpose of which is to ensure strategic, socio-economic and environmental benefits from bioinnovation. Ben is on various local and international bodies, including the International Advisory Committee on Global Bioeconomy, and was leading the charge of the Bioeconomy Initiative under South Africa's presidency. Ben, I give you the floor.
Thanks very much, Ludo, and good afternoon to all. The bioeconomy is one of the growing trends around the world because it is seen as a key theme, instrument, tool to assist with the challenges of climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation, pollution. So let me just start with the context. We have a changing climate. We all aware of this. We all read it in the newspapers every day. Very often there are good news stories that tell you how many Chinese electric vehicles are being produced and various other good news stories. The fact is we are still extracting more fossil fuel than ever before, and there is no obvious dip in the graph showing a decline. So we are still on track. We are exceeding our 1.5 degree Paris Agreement target. We are already exceeding that, although it could be on a temporary basis, but last year and this year are the two hottest on record. And we are set to exceed 2% and possibly 3%. If you look at the impacts, 2 and 3 degrees is not actually going to make a huge difference. We just turn the air conditioning on a little bit more. But if you look at the impact in terms of the extreme weather events and so on, and the various other things, there is a significant change between a 1.5 degree scenario that we all agreed on and the 2 or 3 degrees. So I'm not going to go into the detail, but there is significant difference, and unfortunately this impact is going to be mostly on the developing world and Africa in particular. And the world has many current distractions: geopolitical and economic tensions, trade and physical wars, climate change impacts gulf between the global north and the global south. And we need to transform the current business world thinking, which I'm calling classical economics, into something that is more sustainable and equitable. And we're terming it the bioeconomy, the new way of thinking. Obviously, bioeconomy does not solve all the problems. We still need solar panels, we still need electric vehicles, and so on. There's so much more to it. But the bioeconomy is a significant contributor to developing an economy that has sustainability built into it. We need to develop fossil fuel replacements. We need to stimulate private sector investment into the bioeconomy, because the public sector just can't afford everything that needs doing. So we need the private sector to invest significantly. And we also need to move beyond the politics, the geopolitics that we have. We're starting to need to focus on technical leadership that can talk facts and figures without fear of a voter backlash and so on. And what we really need is coordinated and global effort. This is not an individual country approach. We need individual countries to do what they can, but this has to be a global effort. Wealthy nations have historically impacted the environment far more than the poorer ones, and the poorer ones, as I said, bear the brunt of climate change. We need to look at options such as debt swaps and new tools. Mitigation will require new sustainable approaches, not only for the business world, how the business world works, but on the sourcing of biomass to make sustainable products. And it is essential that countries are not left behind. We need the whole world to move towards this. The red ring shows the African contribution to carbon emissions. Climate change is likely to lead to increased global conflict as the world warms. There will be geopolitics of food and biomass in addition to fossil fuel production. We need to start thinking of replacing fossil fuels that impact the environment. Sorry, let me just... The ultimate is to have non-partisan solutions provided that can be adapted to the real world. But we need to know the real facts and figures so that we can understand the seriousness of the situation, and we can act on that. Countries will do it differently, but we all need to understand the situation that we're in from technical rather than political leadership. The South African Bioeconomy Strategy, it's a science-based innovation strategy. So it's not about spades and tractors for farmers. It's about creating new products out of biomass. The objective in South Africa is to be a significant contributor to the country's economy. And the key difference with much of the global north is that in addition to environmental benefits of many, not all biotechnologies, of many biotechnologies, we are also needing to create jobs and livelihoods. That's a key component of the African development model. We need to create jobs, employment, and livelihoods. In South Africa, our approach is threefold. We need to coordinate the multiple effects and entrepreneurs and actors in this space to make sure that we are pulling together rather than pulling apart. We need to develop the national system of innovation to create an enabling environment for the bioeconomy, to create regulations, to create skills, to create science infrastructure. And lastly, government is investing in strategic programs to create a focus for the work, but obviously the national system of innovation is supportive more generally. The point to note is that this is one leg of South Africa's bioeconomy approach. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment has its biodiversity economy strategy, which Karombe Matibe from DFFE will be talking more about shortly. Our current statistics show that the bioeconomy in South Africa is 8.3% of GDP and employs 1.2 to 1.5 million people. We need to update the strategy. South Africa is ranked in the Global Biotechnology Scorecard, 30 out of 100 countries. That's pretty good. Although we are investing only 0.6% into gross expenditure on R&D, and this ranks us above Hungary and Poland, which are spending nearly 3 times more on R&D. So South Africa's got a lot going for it in the bioeconomy space. And these are some other opportunities that we are looking at. The last slide that I have is looking at the South African presidency of the G20, and there is one specific work stream called the G20 Initiative on Bioeconomy that I was leading. There were 4 key issues that we looked at during the course of this year. One was the African opportunity. We looked at the complexity and difficulty that Africa has in deriving value. As Ludo mentioned, less than 10% of the biomass produced on the African continent is realized to Africans. So what we're doing is we're exporting raw material and the rest of the world is benefiting from it. But we have a whole lot of examples where Ghana and Nigeria and I forget the other countries, have banned certain raw material exports because they wanted to add value, but the system wasn't quite working, so they had to lift the bans. But nevertheless, Africa is ready, Africa has the opportunity, and this is a key opportunity for us. The second point was metrics and standards. If you want to develop bioeconomies, firstly, you have to be able to measure it. They're territorial measures so that you can see how the country is developing. There are value chain metrics so that you can advance trading and reassure the market that the products that they are buying have got valid carbon credentials. The third point was financing, a key gap in Africa and much of the developing world. We have established the concept of a bioeconomy financing hub for Africa, which is going to be supported by the private sector. It will be launching early next year. It's a significant step forward for bioeconomy development in Africa. And the last point is we presented to the G20 an idealized structure for global bioeconomy implementation. The key issue is that the current global instruments, such as the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UN agencies, the World Economic Forum, the G20, the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they are all hamstrung by politics. That may sound a little bit extreme, but for example, the IPCC that produces these reports on climate change, they cannot make recommendations. They have to follow the mandate given to them by 190 odd countries around the world. They cannot go against that. We need something that is technical leadership that interfaces with the political world through the G20 and is supported by the UN agencies. But we can't afford to be hamstrung by politics. And this was the last point that we made at the G20. To quite substantial support, not universal, but quite substantial support. So the G20 initiative on bioeconomy has got a lot of support, and we will be continuing it with it beyond here. Thank you, Ludo.
Thank you very much, Ben. And I think you showed very clearly that is what you call the African opportunity is something that is missing. So this agro-processing is extremely important. And I think when we look also in the audience, we see a limited number of people, whereas in the former one, in agriculture, we had more people. So I think this is still missing, and we have to change that point so that we can create value out of these leftovers of the non-used biomass, the waste, etc., etc. And so this is certainly one of the big challenges for the future. Speaking about agriculture, that's the basis of the biomass. I would like to invite Tabi Moteti, who will present us today agricultural primary production. So that's really what we need first. Beyond food and nutrition, creating sustainable jobs, livelihoods, and economic opportunities in Africa. It's really the point, how can we create more jobs, not just in food production, but in all the elements that we can valorize of the biomass. And Tabi is the Executive Manager for Advanced Agriculture and Food Cluster at the CSIR, with an extensive experience in agriculture, sustainable food systems, climate change, forestry, and natural resource management. She works across the public sector, collaborating with private and international organizations on the bioinnovation to leverage catalytic power of bioeconomy for the agriculture triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit. Tabi, you have the floor.
Thanks, Ludo. And good afternoon, everyone, once again. So if we can please just go to the next slide, or I can move it myself. Okay. So the objective here is to speak to bioeconomy with an agricultural production lens, but looking beyond food and nutrition security. And therefore, the posture of this talk is to look at valorization of biomass that is obtained from agricultural production and initiatives to, for sustainable jobs, livelihoods, and economic opportunities on the continent. And the question is, would you say, as the CSIR, do we have that leverage to speak about the African continent, or only on initiatives in the Republic? And I want to argue that we do have the leverage to also speak on behalf of certain of our network partners on the African continent. And therefore, I will speak to the outline as it is reflected. Okay, so it's a bit slow. So our aspirational imperative is obviously informed by the UN global body that is responsible for agriculture, which is the FAO. And in their publication of 2021, they set out principles and criteria for sustainable bioeconomy, which suggests that we actually, if we drive bioeconomy effectively, we are able to touch on all the 17 sustainable development goals of the UN. And so that is very aspirational, but how achievable is it? So this is very interesting because the slides are rather taking long to move. So we are leaning on the policy instruments that are already available. And when Ben spoke, he spoke a lot about the bioeconomy strategy of South Africa, which I believe is a policy and a strategy that came before its time. And for that, we commend you, the DSTI. You did quite well. And because we were so behind in terms of agricultural productivity, it was leaning a lot on biotechnology, which has worked very well. In the previous session, we saw from the chief economist of the AgBiz, the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, how agricultural productivity has improved significantly with biotechnology tools, their application, and all the trade interventions that have been made. But in addition to this bioeconomy strategy of South Africa, we have on the continent Agenda 2063 of the AU, we have CSIR 2034, we have also the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program of the AU, and here we have the National Development Plan, and we have the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan, which obviously encompasses all the initiatives of agriculture. And all of these policies are underpinned by very strong intentions to drive bioeconomy. If you can take us to the next slide, please. So with the policy instruments that we have, we believe that it is possible for Africa, and with the collaboration of the DSTI and the CSIR partnership to really, within a networked opportunity, leverage all the bioeconomy opportunities on the continent. As the CSIR, we host a program of AU NEPAD that is called SANBIO, Southern African Biosciences Network. And it is located here in the CSIR, but supported directly by the DSTI. And it has sister networks across the continent, and those similar networks enable us to work across the continent. But specifically, if you can take me to the next slide, in the Southern African sub-region, we have arrangements and network collaborations that touch almost every one of the 16 SADC member states. Next slide, please. And part of the work that we do in SANBIO and across the research work of the CSIR, funded mostly by the DSTI in the advanced agriculture and food cluster, it is about agro-processing that is driving particularly biomass valorization. And here I am showing you an example of where we have used waste in biofertilizers, and also when we look at a particular commodity, when you take sweet potato, for example, it is not just a high or nutrient-dense commodity, it also fulfills all the other value additions that we can add through our bioprocessing initiatives, which I will show. So in all of these interventions, collaborating with our African partners, we are looking beyond just food security. If you can take us to the next slide, please. And we work across the value chain. So for example, if we look at the essential oils or our indigenous crops, for instance, we not only get interested in the production, which we work with the Agricultural Research Council here in the country to assist with that production, but we also use our high technology and advanced research infrastructure in the CSIR to produce products in collaboration with communities, because they're also innovators. And so we hope that when you go and visit our facilities, maybe on the 10th, on Wednesday, you'll be able to see some of this equipment. And so we work with communities, the grassroots, for new products that are not just food or for food and nutrition security, but that enable sustainable jobs, economic activities, and livelihoods. If you can take us to the next slide, please. So here is an example of a case study that the work that we have done on essential oils, a number of them. We have partnered with industry partners, CIOBI, the Essential Oils Business Incubator of South Africa, and the Technology Innovation Agency and the ARC and ourselves, to also support communities with processing of essential oils off-grid, with renewable energy, including utilization of biomass for heat and energy generation for these operations. If you can take me to the next slide, please. And so we have worked with different provinces and communities focusing on different types of essential oils, rose, geranium, lavender, buchu. Some of these programs are being supported by the Department of Environmental Affairs. So we are again demonstrating that there is an opportunity to utilize or apply bioeconomy in the growth of economies locally, focusing on niche products and niche commodities that are actually doing well in specific localities, either here in the country or on the continent. If we can go to the next slide, please. And so in conclusion, we are saying, what next do we need to grow beyond just the 10% that is currently reported as the maximum benefit of bioeconomy? We are saying, let us look at, strengthening our R&D innovation. Let us ensure that we collaborate especially in the creation and development and acquisition of strategic research infrastructure and logistics, so that as a sub-region of Southern Africa and other sub-regions of the continent, we can pool our resources to become more effective. And you will be seeing some of this infrastructure on the 10th when you go and visit. And also, let us strengthen our bioeconomy strategies. So we are talking about the South African example here, but we have to strengthen these strategies across the continent. Let us also, through R&D support, ensure that the innovators in the rural spaces also have access to technical standards and metrics that enable their products to have access to markets. Let's also ensure that we do this not just for the money, but we are also doing it for the whole triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit. So profit is not necessarily the motivator alone, but it is important to do things sustainably. And this is the end of my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ntabi, for this very nice presentation. And I think it's very clear that this processing is just the way to go, and also to bring the processing towards the people. So it's not just to do the research, but to go further on. Speaking about people, I think it's evident that Africa has a lot of indigenous knowledge that needs more valorization. Therefore, Aunk Chabala will present us indigenous knowledge valorization, a model ready for scale-up. Dr. Chabala is the current director of the Indigenous Knowledge-Based Technology Innovation Unit of the South African Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. He is a medical natural scientist. He also served in several World Health Organizations as expert committees on public health and medicine sector. He has led and participated in development of several policy documents and guidelines for the bioeconomy, integrated disease surveillance, and the response strategy. Aunk, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Ludo, and good afternoon, colleagues. What I will be speaking on is a model for valorization, for upscaling the work that we have already done, pretty much what Ben and Tabi has been talking about, but within the context of indigenous knowledge systems, or now we re-languaging some of these things by saying African knowledge systems. So, in short, South Africa has great political will in terms of supporting African knowledge systems. And with that, we're saying we have the innovation capacity, as you heard. On top of the innovation capacity that we also have an untapped African knowledge systems. We haven't even moved an inch, given the fact that where we're coming from, African knowledges were oppressed by the system. These three issues are then supported by the fact that we are a mega biodiverse country, and our colleague Dr. Korombi will talk to that. The various market research industries, they have projected some of the global figures or global markets when it comes to functional products or bio-based products that we can look into, and a few are projected here in terms of the medicines themselves, or the nutraceuticals, cosmeceuticals, and the health infusions, things that we drink not because it's tea time. And we're saying that as Africans, we must actually target a certain percentage of these global markets. And in South Africa, these are some of the figures. And with these figures, we are saying that it's possible to create great jobs, maybe up to 1 million jobs out of these various innovations, looking into the entire value chains from massive growing of the plants that are involved here, to the logistics, to the warehousing, including the innovations and the distribution throughout the world. So the latest child, in the block is cannabis. Not only in terms of medical cannabis or medicinal cannabis, but the various applications of cannabis. And in South Africa alone, the master plan projects that this can create up to 250,000 jobs. Now, if in South Africa we're saying we have up to 300,000 African medicines practitioners, if all of them are active practitioners of African medicines, that's jobs. So those plus these ones of cannabis, it's easy to reach 1 million jobs just like that. What we do in the Department of Science and Innovation, we have a certain strategic mandate, and these pointers that are put here, they simply look into interfacing African knowledge systems within the national system of innovation. And of course, then doing the science from basic research to innovative research, technology transfer, building enterprises, and of course, we're looking towards commercialization and industrialization in the long run. And this is done through a model. We call it Ubuntu-based Bioinnovation model, and this is the core of how we do what we do. It's a model which is transdisciplinary in nature, which says that an African mindset doesn't necessarily think in a linear manner, but is secular, meaning we can commercialize whilst we're doing research at the same time, because these things are being used currently in the system. So there is no need for us to wait for the results of research. But the essence of the model is that everything that we conceptualize is informed by African knowledge. And then by integral research and development, we talk about this transdisciplinarity that around the communities or the knowledge holders that are supported, there are various knowledge workers, be they medical doctors or pharmacologists or economists or people who deal with enterprise development, so that the communities do not have to struggle in terms of how they valorize their work. Inclusive innovation, you know what that means. Local technology transfer and acceleration, you know what that means. But we promote holistic enterprise development, meaning Africans have been enterprising all along. When you move into African villages and cities, you see a lot of markets. And we are saying that all those models that Africans have been using must be brought into the system and must be appreciated because they work. And conscious commercialization talks to the fact that we are saying that these things do what we say they do. But most importantly, that there has to be sustainability. We have to take care of the environment at the same time. Hence, we promote green economies at the same time. And this model has got funders around it. It's not a perfect model, we are perfecting it, but we are saying that each step of the way should have resources around it and a number of various role players from government to private sector to universities to science council, so everyone knows their responsibility within the system. We are implementing this work through 6 platforms. On medicines, cosme-neutral health infusions. These are RDI intensive, and all these top four are supported by the tech transfer and commercialization platforms for us to take this thing to the market. And of course, we're collapsing all this into an institute, just as we have learned from our colleagues from the East. Talking about biomass, Ludo, we currently have up to 45 pieces of land which is active, where we're doing our agricultural work, and these are supported by actually not 15 but 19 dedicated IKS laboratories that we are continuing to upscale and strengthen, so that at the end of the day we are able to do what it's supposed to do to support the innovation value chain and all the commercial chains. we do product development here on this campus, but also we put these things, these product development facilities in the communities, because it's also violence, an epistemic violence to uproot old people with knowledge and bring them into the cities. So we put these facilities in villages and get the youth to then work in these facilities and produce whatever needs to be produced, whether it's primary production but also secondary productions. Then they own the means of production from the beginning to the end. They don't have to wait for some royalties after so many years. We also train them with enterprise development training programs and accelerator programs, whereby we hold them by hand until they can stand on their own, and we have various accelerators throughout the country. We work together with our colleagues at Environment and Forestry and Fisheries. I trust Korombi will speak a little bit on that. There is this initiative called Biopanza, and the idea is that this instrument will assist with market research, but it's a one-stop shop where there is innovation, there is market access, there's sustainability in terms of the biomass, and regulatory issues. And lately we're thinking of an investment summit to support these initiatives, because there's just no money in government. So we trust that the minister, the president, will be able to assist us in getting champions of industry to come and support our work, so that we then grow into maybe in the next 7 to 10 years, we aiming to build at least 4 CGMPs. One is already funded, where we'll be building an industry for African medicines in the Free State, linked to KZN. And then here in Gauteng and on this campus, and next door at the Innovation Hub, we're thinking of putting something for cosmeceuticals. And then in Limpopo, linking Limpopo, University of Venda, Mpumalanga, put one on nutraceuticals, because Limpopo and Mpumalanga are the bread baskets in terms of food, especially indigenous foods, which we don't eat as South Africans. So the idea is to valorize this. And ultimately, the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape have extended their hands that they are willing to set up, co-fund the setting up of companies that will produce health infusions, Johannibush, in the same light as Rooibos. Thank you so much. That's all that I had to share.
Thank you very much, Aung, for this very nice presentation and for showing us that it is really working. It's not just an idea. You saw the facilities, you saw the different setups, the different products that are coming out. And so I think it's really a challenge for the rest of Africa as well to look into this approach and to create, like you mentioned, maybe 1 million of jobs in the future. It's really great. And it's only in these niche applications. It can even go further to other applications. So, speaking about agriculture, speaking about biomass, it means that we use land, and Africa is a continent with a very high biodiversity, and so if we take land to grow biomass, it will be a challenge. So we are really have to think about how can we keep that balance, and therefore Mr. Korombi Matibe will present us Harnessing Biodiversity for Sustainable Development. How can we combine these two approaches? Mr. Matibe serves as the Chief Director for Biodiversity, Economy and Sustainable Use at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment since May 2017, and is currently the chairperson of the Northwest Parks and Tourism Board. He holds a master's degree in environmental management through the University of Nottingham, and he previously served in numerous portfolios, including his role as head of department at the public participation of the Freedom Park Heritage Site in Pretoria. I give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator, for this opportunity, and let me appreciate my fellow panelists for this wonderful opportunity, and appreciate the delegates that are here physically, but also those that are joining virtually. Just to start off with just reminding ourselves that here we are in this beautiful continent of Africa, sitting with this massive wealth of biodiversity, some of which is only endemic to this continent, but in this case, endemic to South Africa. Some of you, or all of us, know that we have got this rooibos species which is always making headlines, positive headlines all over the world for its health benefits, but also it's a tea which actually massage you to sleep when you are tired. So you can only find rooibos growing endemically to this beautiful land and in the Cape region. So it only emphasizes that we are rich with this species. As you can see, 7% of the world reptiles, 10% of the world plants, 15% of the world coastal marine are really found in this beautiful country. I think this thing is, oh yes. For us to do the work of bioeconomy, as my colleague Ben and also the colleagues have indicated earlier on, we needed to develop policies as government. If you look at the G-STIC, they've developed, there is also an act that also supports indigenous knowledge. I think it's Act number 6 of 2019. So if you look at the forestry, fisheries and environment, we have actually coined chapter 6 of our NEMBA, which specifically look at how we epitomize on the, or take opportunity on contextualizing and domesticating the Nagoya Protocol within South Africa. So we have done that. But for all this, we had to develop a white paper policy. And this white paper policy on conservation and sustainable use looked at 4 critical goals, one of which is biodiversity conservation, sustainable use, equitable access and benefit sharing, and of course, transformation. But if you look globally, the work that we are doing as this country, where we are tapping into the rich resources to be able to generate and develop products out of them, is not amiss in terms of acceptable global norms and standards, in terms of all these various conventions that we have. That is why at times it always becomes very difficult when we are utilizing our resources in a sustainable way and adding value through technology and innovation and research, when other lobbies then say you can't utilize your resources. So I find that very academically is a dichotomy and something which I don't understand, because if we are utilizing our resources in a sustainable manner, we should be encouraged to do more. If you look at the ICUN said sustainable use is conservation. It's not a contributor to conservation, it's conservation itself. That is sustainable use. But if you go to the Rio Conventions, 1992, in Brazil, it talks about conservation of biological diversity, but also components of biological diversity are sustainable, but also fair and equitable sharing of benefits. If you go to CITES, it's the same. Now, the recent Global Biodiversity Framework gave impetus into the issue of utilizing our resources sustainably. That is why Target 5 talks about ensuring the use, harvesting, and trade of wild species in a sustainable, safe, and legal, preventing overexploitation, minimizing impacts, and so forth. So is Target 9. We recently had in 2023 the SADC wildlife-based strategy, economy strategy, which really begin to unravel the value of what we have as SADC countries, and they showed that we are sitting with billions and billions of rands worth of assets in biodiversity that we have. I won't repeat this one because my colleague also alluded to it. Needless to say that way back in the 60s, South Africa was faced with a choice of either just sitting and letting people who were exploiting the faunal resources at the time, or intervene, and the government at the time intervened and be able to draw in the private sector, in other words, the ranching, the wildlife industry, communities, and so forth, such that we were able to rescue the depleting number of wild species, especially your large game and so forth, from a meager of about 501,000 at the time to today's 20 million thriving population. So we are growing, and we are seeing intermittent growth with a good trajectory growth of about 3.5% of these wild species per annum. That is why in 2023, moderator, we decided as this country to do what we call, for the first time, to develop what we call the game meat strategy of South Africa, which we took to cabinet, and cabinet approved it later, and it is now going through the pilot phase. So this strategy currently acknowledges that we are having about 104,000 people employed in the game meat industry as we speak. But the strategy says we can ramp up that, we can amplify that by taking this number to about 202,000 by 2030, in the next 5 years, with a potential growth of an estimated 3.1 billion per annum just for the game meat industry. As we speak now, we're generating 59,000 tons of game meat. But we can take that and double it to 100,000 tons, which means 100 million kilograms of game meat, so that you can be able to see game meat in every retail shop, in every spaza shop, as long as they comply with the veterinary services. So it's important that these are the fruits that we are beginning to reap simply because of the efforts we put on sustainable use. When we utilize our resources, we don't only want to repeat what happened in the 60s when people were excited about gunpowder after the Second World War. We want to make sure that as we harvest our plants and animals, we look to the future. Because somebody earlier on in the morning, I think it was the chairperson of CSIR, did allude to the fact that we are borrowing this current that we have from our children. So we must take care of this biodiversity in that manner. This strategy that we have developed, which is part of the bioeconomy of South Africa, as my colleague Ben indicated earlier on, acknowledges that there is an opportunity for us to inject additional 397,000 jobs in the next 10 years. And this can actually be even more greater, depending on how we will valorize our resources that we have, tap into the technology and the innovation. And part of the addition to add to my colleague who just presented is that we are now saying there is further opportunity which we will tap much into CSIR and G-STIC, because in this slide that you see here, which is probably my last slide, it is emphasizing that beside us tapping into the biological resources, We need to make sure that we tap into innovation to build on the resilience of our biodiversity, but at the same time generate the products that are proudly South African, so that we stop the erosion of taking all our resources in raw form to be beneficiated outside the country. So there is that opportunity, and we believe working together we can be able to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is your phone. Please. I think we just heard about 1 million jobs. Now we heard about a few 100,000 of jobs. So it's really very nice to see that this potential of biomass in Africa, this potential of growing crops that do have very high value, the potential of nature, of biodiversity, that we can turn it into a social economic value, and not just, as you said, Mr. Korombi, by exploiting the country and in 10 years everything is gone, but no, by keeping it in a sustainable way. And I think I liked very much the way you said the products that we take out of this biodiversity must be taken out in a sustainable way and not in an exploiting way. That's really the way. Having said that, I would like now to move to the last part of the discussion of this afternoon, and that's the market. Although we already heard about a lot about things of the market, and in that way we invited two speakers and to speak about what's next in the big biomass valorization, let me say. So in that way, I would like to invite Chepo Mangoele. He's an award-winning chemical engineer, entrepreneur, and inventor, driving the future of green innovation in Africa. And he's the founder and CEO of a company, Lignin Organic Limited, and he leads the continent's first producer of sulfur-free lignin, transforming waste plant biomass, which is a waste of the processing for cellulose fibers, into high-value, eco-friendly solutions. His flagship innovation is Native Care, and it will replace harmful synthetic ingredients with renewable plant-based alternatives. So we continue in the same way of the presentations, I think, and in that way we really look forward to your presentation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ludo. I think my fellow colleagues have really set the stage for us to really speak about the market side of things. We are sort of a beneficiary of the bioeconomy strategy, actually, because the work that we've done, all of it actually wouldn't have been possible without the assistance of the DSTI through programs like SIP as well as BMEDI. And with that said, okay. Sorry about that. With that said, our company, what we are focusing on is essentially pioneering the transition from fossil fuel-based products to more plant-based renewable. And our key components in terms of focus with the problems, we've looked at agricultural waste. I think we've spoken ad nauseum about the issues around agricultural waste. And what we see happen these days is that there's a lot of people burning this for fuel and producing products that we believe are not as sustainable. And that's why we then looked into the biorefinery concept. But the biorefinery concept in of itself, we've seen that most of the refineries do not become commercially viable at large scale. And this is primarily because either they're not fully valorizing the biomass or the market is not as receptive. So this is also one of our core challenges. And the third one is lignin underutilization. There's a lot of lignin, over 50 metric tons produced per year of lignin, but most of it is used as fuel, and we thought that perhaps we could come up with solutions around this. So that's why we developed our biorefinery concept. Essentially what we've done is we've developed the first total biomass valorization biorefinery. Essentially, this is a zero-waste biorefinery where, in simple terms, if you were to take in, let's say, agricultural waste like macadamia nut shells, which is what we've used, as well as bagasse, you are then able to produce over 19 products without any waste coming out of this process. Our flagship product, like I said, we focus a lot on lignin. What we've been able to do is become essentially the first soda lignin producer in Africa. But also what we've done is we've become sort of pioneers in modification of lignin. So we've created one of the first natural multifunctional preservative systems using lignin. So we really are pioneers within the lignin modification space as well. But we also do produce other products that, due to obviously resource allocations, are products that we can produce as part of the biorefinery concept, but from a market development standpoint, we're currently focusing on net UV care. So essentially, this is a lignin-based preservative, like I said, with multifunctionality. Currently looking at focusing in the cosmetics and skincare market to really put that in there, because currently there's not natural preservatives that are fully multifunctional as well. So that's sort of our main focus now, with the utilization of lignin. And we've been able to do multiple applications of this through serums, face creams, facial cleansers, and the likes. But our journey actually started quite different from how normally these biorefineries start. So we didn't start from a research council or a university. All of this work was started sort of back in the university days through a kitchen scale, if you will. So I started doing the R&D work using some resourcefulness in the kitchen just to avoid IP implications. But then we sort of received assistance from the DSTI from 2019. That's when we were able to start doing lab scale production of lignin. And at the moment, what we are currently working on is a facility that has the capacity to produce 10 tons a month of lignin. However, it's something that we will commercialize once we've sorted out market development side of things. But our whole aim is to be able to create a full-scale biorefinery that if you are in Australia and you have macadamia nut shells, we can put the biorefinery there. If you are in Zambia and you have sawdust, you can put it there and still produce the same products. So with regards to the market development side of things, we've done things quite differently in that we've tried different strategies. So we've tried things from B2B to B2B to C and B2C. But I'll take you briefly through what we've done thus far. In the beginning, we were focusing on soda lignin and producing soda lignin in small batches and selling it as is, the raw material. And we realized that there was not enough uptake of the material. So we then thought, perhaps let's look at targeting one of the properties of the lignin, the UV blocking application part of it, to then sell this to sunscreen manufacturers. And what we realized also is that in that field, there's a level of requirements when it comes to the color of the material. So we then realized that with the color complications, it would sort of slow down the product adoption. So we thought perhaps let's look at B2C in-house and take some of the products that we have and then put those in the market to generate cash. Because while all of this is happening, we still need to be sustainable from a cash flow perspective. So what we then commercialize is Orfil. Orfil essentially is a 100% natural skincare and cosmetic brand that utilizes our biosurfactant that comes from a biorefinery, as well as the lignin as a preservative system to create products like a micellar water and a makeup brush cleanser and hand wash. So essentially what we've done with this is be able to showcase the power of some of the products that we produce from a biorefinery standpoint. But what we've also then done to sort of supplement cash flow issues, what we then produced was LignoClean. And this is one of the first green chemical where what we're doing is producing industrial cleaning products. So looking at 100% natural degreaser, multi-purpose cleaner, floor cleaner, bathroom cleaner, all of which comes from the biosurfactant and lignin that we produce in the biorefinery concept. And so currently these two products are on the market, and this is sort of what we're using now as a company to sustain ourselves. But What we are looking at now from a more long-term perspective is looking at bulk sales for lignin. So we currently have a couple of distributors within our pipeline that look at now purchasing lignin at larger volumes to be able to then distribute these in various markets. Because our material can be used in multiple applications. And I think my colleague Jane will speak about some of the applications where lignin can be used. And what we are also now working on is commercializing the preservative into the cosmetics market. We've had a few challenges around that, but this is sort of our more long-term goal while we're using Orfil and LignoClean as cash generation brands at the moment. These are some of the challenges we face, but I don't think these are challenges that are sort of unique to us. So most of the bio companies that exist within the African context face some of these things. I think one of the biggest problems we face is product adoption, because oftentimes we think that customers are also on this green bandwagon and everyone will take up the solution as soon as you bring it just because it's green. And we realized the hardest way that people actually, to some degree, really care about price first, the environment after. So this has been one of our biggest challenges. But what it also does is that it limits the growth of the company, because what we do have is small early adopters that purchase the material, but to be able to move to sort of a larger market, we need enough of these sort of early adopters to be able to get there. But without any legislative or regulatory push, that makes it much more difficult for us to get to that stage. What we've seen also, this is where we are now at the valley of death. What we've seen is there's not a lot of patient capital in the biospace. So what happens is that the gestation period of a biorefinery, for example, is about 8 to 10 years before you actually start being commercial. And in that period, there's not capital that's able to go with you in the journey. So for example, we've had assistance from the DSTI, but if you go to the venture capital side of things where it's more commercial money or the banking, we are not able to sort of garner that sort of financial support just because we are in a unique position where there's not enough uptake, but the technology is great. So this is sort of one of the key challenges that we've seen. And this stumbles the growth also and the product adoption, because without enough capital injection in, especially patient capital, we're not able to move past that point and make sure that some of these products become widely adopted. And one of the other key challenges that, in South Africa, we've had some issues around standards and labels, especially if you're working with a unique material. So there's a lot of hurdles to get through, especially from a regulatory standpoint. And this also hinders adoption of the material because there's no standards, and some people are skeptical about the material if they don't see certification and standards in place that allude to that sort of application. One of the biggest issues also is market awareness. There is sort of a dual market awareness issue around the consumers themselves. Most people don't really know much about greener, more sustainable material. And thus then the big industry will not then adopt these material because there's not enough push from the consumer side of things. And to also then have the budget to be able to do market development, it's one of the huge costs that's required. And as a startup, at early stage, this is one of the things that it's difficult to get access to. So we've seen a lot of issues around market access as well. And I think the last point is just, we are part of the most innovative people in the lignin space, but we don't get the credibility that we get when it comes to lignin in discussions, only by the mere fact that we are in the global south. And we've seen that happen a lot where we are not put in these discussions by mere fact that there's some level of credibility issues that comes with just the mere fact of being the global south. And I think we are sort of a living case study of what a company in the bioeconomy is, and the work we've done really shows that, and we are happy to share our learnings and take it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chepo, for this very nice presentation and showing us that a completely new element in the biomass can be valorized. And you mentioned that you need a lot of finances, but I already found that going from your kitchen scale to what you are doing now is already a huge step on a very short period of time. So thanks a lot, and we look forward to the next step on the whole biorefinery. Having said that, let us move now to the second speaker in this market evaluation, also the last speaker of today, and that is Jane Maloney. She has been a leader in the forest, pulp and paper industry since 1996. The forest, pulp and paper industry is on one end an old industry, but with a lot of new challenges, I think we can say, and so in that way it's extremely important. As an executive director of the Paper Manufacturers Association of South Africa since 2008, she champions environmental issues including water, waste, carbon tax and biodiversity. In fact, all the topics of this conference, on behalf also of the forest products sector, and we speak really about the products of the forest. Jane served as a president of the International Council of Forest and Paper Association. She remains active in this association steering committee and serves on the UN Food and Agriculture Organization Advisory Committee on Sustainable Forest-Based Industries. Jane, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ludo. What am I standing between, you and a gala dinner? Or you at home listening? Thank you for joining online and in person. Really appreciate it. And what a privilege and honor to speak on the same platform as Tsepo, a real entrepreneur. I think he actually deserves another round of applause. So I represent, as Ludo said, one of the oldest bioeconomies in the world. And if you think about it, think shelter, think fire, think food. We've been around for a long time. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We even are at that apex of self-actualization and have been since the days of Pharaoh, making paper from papyrus. But what is happening to paper and to pulp in this day and age? I see that we don't have a printed program. We all have a little, what are those things called? A QR code to scan. But I just want to remind you that if you print something that you're going to repeatedly refer to, it's more carbon-friendly, bio-friendly, because the carbon is still locked up in this paper, than if you constantly fire up your cell phone to look at that program over and over again when your cell phone is charged by energy produced largely from fossil fuel. So, anything that you can make from fossil fuel, you can make from trees. Like I said, we've been around for a long time, and according to the FAO, only 13 to 15% of total wood consumed is actually made into pulp and paper. And yet we contribute 350 billion to the global economy, and that's US dollars. And the forest products sector contributes 663 billion. That is according to the FAO. I think I press up. Do I go up? No, down. No, you did it for me. Okay, maybe that's a good idea. I'll delegate. Okay, so here we have some statistics that were first, this slide was first put together by the Finnish forest industry, and you can see there clearly what has actually happened to paper. So graphic papers, double-digit reduction in the EU, year on year. That's what we are seeing. And everybody is looking for ways to add value. How do you add value to your biomass? How do you add value to your pulp? We're seeing innovative business solutions. We've seen Suzano, who's the largest pulp producer in the world, do a joint venture with Kimberly-Clark. Why? Because there are 5 million, I think, too many tons of pulp in the world right now. So if you have a joint venture, you can automatically then supply within that joint venture. What a great idea. The Nordic countries were the first ones to start talking about a biorefinery. But today, even talking about a biorefinery is almost a little passé. People now want to talk about the bioeconomy. Those same companies that were talking about a biorefinery are now talking about offering biomaterial solutions. So the world does change indeed. In this slide, you can see that the bioeconomy products are what is going to grow our sector. So we are not a declining industry. We are transforming one with bioeconomy initiatives driving this new growth. If you can change to the next slide, how do we maximize our resources? There are limited number of trees. If you can just press again, thanks. And here we can see exactly what you can make from trees. Isn't it remarkable? Everything from everyday products to textiles, to chemicals, additives, food, cosmetics, advanced materials, construction, all of those things. That's what you can actually make. But one of the really interesting things that we have seen, and we heard Seppo talking about the importance of branding. You know you've arrived if you have a brand name for something and it's selling well and it's in demand. Your product, your price, and your place, so important. And Sappi, one of our companies, has actually produced a replacement for a toxic chrome-based drilling mud thinner. Who knew? So even the baby drill industry can be influenced by the bioeconomy. There are a number of other products, but I'm not going to go into them. We were asked to look at biomass. The first thing you think when you hear the word biomass, be honest, is anyone on the floor? Energy. You think burn it. But in South Africa, our biomass is truly precious. And in Africa, we also have, they said 60% of the world's arable land is in Africa. And we are only valorizing 10% of our biomass. But we have to remember that a third of the energy in developing countries is actually burning wood. 90% in countries like Nepal, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. 45% in India, 28% in China and Brazil. But for us, it should be the last resort. And that's why on here you don't really see energy except from lignin as combined heat and power production in pulp, so as almost a side product. And from a tree planting perspective, our trees are incredibly important. We need an environmental impact assessment, a water use license, a tree license, before we can plant a single tree. And that's a good thing, because we're a water-scarce country. So let's take a look at Africa. If we can move to the next slide. This map of Africa, I had to laugh because it was used earlier, if any of you were in the water session, by Dr. Nico Ilema. And this particular the original mapping was done by Gerardus Mercator, who is Flemish, Ludo, back in 1569, where he made the globe into a rectangle. And what that does, it makes Africa and the countries in the middle look littler than they are. But Africa is huge, and yet 67% of Africa is water scarce. So that is going to obviously be one of the biggest challenges. I spoke to biomass and to burning. What that means is there's a great opportunity for shifting to renewable energy. But how do you get your renewable energy into rural areas? You need to decentralize, you need to use solar, things like that. Earlier we heard in the plenary session with Linda Godfrey, one of the gentlemen there said, what is the energy solution in Africa? He said it's the 4D revolution. You decarbonize, you decentralize, you digitize, and you democratize. So apologies to him for stealing that, but I thought it was rather good. Okay, very important is the conflicting use of land, the demand for land. The first thing, so from a climate change perspective, we heard Ben telling us what's been happening with climate change. And the country from where we plant trees is getting hotter and wetter. But we need to see that as an opportunity. Our trees grow within 10 years, so we have the decadal opportunity to grow new material every 10 years so that we can adapt to climate change. On conflicting use of land, even in Europe, they have the same conflicting use of land. We have Sweden and Finland who actually sent a letter to the EU Commission to say that they can't actually meet their land use change commitments that are required by law because they've experienced fires, they've experienced more use of their forests. The best use of forests, rather than offering offsets to people that are emitting, is to operate sustainable forest management and to have the carbon stored in your harvested wood product. This is a marvelous example, this great big wood desk, and there's a lot of wood in this room. And even Humble Paper stores paper, so it's part of the solution. If we can shift to the last slide. The most difficult thing in concluding is to have the balance between people, planet, and prosperity. And I won't go into these pictures because Ludo has stood up and cut me short. No, don't worry, I won't. Suffice to say that there are great opportunities in Africa, but none of them are simple, and many of them require grassroots societal change. For example, sort out water security, use less wood for fuel, and more for construction and value chains that suit the specific ecosystems. We need to partner to grow the bioeconomy in Africa in a way that benefits her people first and then the whole planet. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jane, for these very nice words and also for explaining very clearly what's the challenge and how we have to move forward. Can I ask to present also the next slide, please? We would like to start. So there, yeah, that one. Okay, and then we go to the next one. That's okay. So we would like to, I will do it myself. Okay. So we would like to go now to a very short panel discussion. Short because we don't have enough time. But I also would like to give the audience the opportunity to ask questions. So before we start the discussion of the two questions that you see on the screen, I would like to see some hands raised of people that want to ask a question so that I can preserve some time as well for them. Otherwise, it will not be serious towards you. So who has a question in the audience? 1, 2. Do I see more? No other questions? Okay. So please, we take some time for your questions. So in that way, we move to the next step. And so there are two fundamental questions I think we have to raise in this discussion. First of all, we present the bioeconomy strongly as an element that can be put on the agenda of climate change mitigation. We heard a lot about we replace fossil by trees and so on. So everything that can be made from fossil can be made from trees, etc. So there's certainly an issue where we see that climate change mitigation can be solved in a certain way by bioeconomy approaches. The same is for biodiversity, etc. And my second question is, how can bioeconomy, and we heard a lot about economy, we heard about the economy of sustainable tourism, we heard the economy of sustainable use of indigenous knowledge, the economy of going to biorefineries, and then finally to see how a forest can be used in a sustainable way to create this economy. So in view of the limited time that we have, I invite the speakers that have really done a great job to answer maybe one of the two questions, or in a combined way, it's up to you. You have the mics in your seats as well, so let's move on. Ben, can I start with you?
Sure. Thank you. You can hear me. Thanks so much, Ludo, and thanks to my colleagues for fantastic presentations. There is so much that needs to happen to advance the bioeconomy so that the world sits up and realizes the importance of what we're trying to do. But I note that Brazil started with the G20 initiative on bioeconomy only last year, and already we have kind of action plans and proposals and ways forward from South Africa's presidency of the G20. So the point I'm making is that every possible forum needs to be harnessed to do the right kind of thing. There's the G20, the Global Bioeconomy Summit, has been doing this for over a decade. The COP30 is already devoting 2 days to its to support of bioeconomy. So there's a growing awareness. What needs to happen as this continues to develop, particularly in the light of climate change, where we need to link the bioeconomy as an important mitigator of the climate change impacts.
Thank you so much. I think this is really the challenge for us for the coming days, to prepare some statements and some notes in order to support this discussion in Belém on the 10th and the 11th of November. And I invite also the audience to help us in that. So please feel free to send us some comments and support us in doing so. Chepo.
I think for me, one of the key elements would be looking around ways to create global finance that's also blended to sort of allow for infrastructure development. I think oftentimes when you're looking into sort of financing the bioeconomy, one of the key areas that's looked at is energy. And we forget that there's also other parts within the ecosystem that includes biomaterials and other regenerative technologies. I think for me, looking at that part will be one of the key. But I think involving big business into this is also quite key, because if there aren't incentives in place for them to actually start looking into these technologies that come from the bioeconomy, there's a high unlikelihood of them not even partaking in this, because we also need that sort of participation from them so that whoever develops these technologies from the bioeconomy is able to have an adopter or sort of an off-taker on the other side. Thus, we are able to sort of advance the bioeconomy.
Thank you so much. And I think finding this balance between energy use, the use of biomass for materials, for food and feed, and for biodiversity will be our challenge for the future as well. This brings me needless by Korombi. Is it not working? Otherwise, use another one. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think one of the elements, and building on what my two colleagues just indicated, and given the competitive advantage we have as a continent on this biomass We need to divert a lot of resources, one, to technology and innovation, but also to investing in ecological infrastructure. You know, I grew up in the 60s, and it was simple for me to go to a river, drink just straight from the river. But today, when I go to the river and I'm thirsty, I actually think 3 times, do I have to drink here? Because I don't know what is there. So, but when we invest in ecological infrastructure, nature has got a way of rewarding good practice by humanity. That is why some studies, including the one that was done by, I think it was Dr. Mohammed in 2019, it showed that between 2001 and 2019, the biodiversity was able to provide ecological services worth $437 billion to the economy of this country. And that cannot continue to happen if we don't invest on ecological infrastructure. So for me, it's one area we really need to, so that we are able to teach, I wouldn't use the word teach, but to raise awareness that we cannot kill these very goose that lay the golden egg and expect our future generations to look at our graves and say, well done, the past generation.
Thank you. I think it's a very nice saying, and this ecological infrastructure indeed will help us to create value also in a very strong way. It's for our health, it's for our pleasure also, and so on. So in that way, it really contributes to the objectives that we are discussing here. The next one is Aung, please.
Yeah, thanks. Our work is in a space of the people that are epistemically violated and excluded. Yet these are the people that have knowledge, which we that are in these houses of knowledge even go and tap and just append their name somewhere at the end of a publication. And in most cases where we come from in Korombi, these are the people who are the custodians of the very same thing that he says that it has got a way of rewarding us. So what is required, it's really a complete overhaul of various systems that we have, systems that will say all knowledge matter and everyone matter. And in this case, these elders must be the ones that drive the means of production, not as some supplementary people to be vampirized, but really to own the value chains, to own their own wealth creation mechanisms. That's how we tilt poverty and inequality, by people taking themselves out of these situations. Thank you.
Thank you. All nature matters and each individual matters. I think it's a very nice message that brings everything together, because if we exploit only nature, it will not be the benefit for all people in that way. Jane. No, can you use another one?
Thank you. Okay, there are 3 conference of the parties. There's biodiversity, there's climate change, and there's desertification. The thinking now is that the common thread should be the bioeconomy. But how do we actually raise the bioeconomy to get the sort of recognition that it needs? it's very important that we don't have nature-based solutions that are solutions for some parts of the world's emissions, but not solutions for industrialization in Africa. And it's very important that we have clear-cut carbon accounting rules. In South Africa, we are blessed with very clear-cut rules about carbon. We pay a carbon tax. Sequestration in harvested wood products is clearly recognized. We have a methodology to measure it. It works. And in the rest of the world, they are still battling with this. The ISO and another organization, I think the WEF, are looking at GHG rules and how to have carbon accounting rules that keep everybody happy. Article 6.4 is a problem. Nobody's happy with Article 6.4. So if we can have clear carbon accounting rules, if we can have sustainable biodiversity sourcing, so very important stewardship, things like that. And I could go on, but maybe just those two are important, and I won't take away from Tabi.
Thank you so much. So these clear carbon accounting rules are linked, I think, to what Ben was mentioning about metrics and standards. It's really what we need. And then Europe has a carbon tax. South Africa has a carbon tax. There are other places in the world that have a carbon tax. I call this a kind of coalition of the willing. And if they combine, they have to make their metrics and standards in a uniform way so that we can speak in the same level. This brings me to Ntabi.
Okay, thank you very much. So from where I stand, with a very strong, I believe, African voice on the opportunity for strengthening our already existing policies and legislative pillars on the continent, because we are actually a coalition of the willing as a continent. That is demonstrated by our existing initiatives by putting in place these policy and strategic pillars. We need then to collaborate a lot more strongly, understanding that we have also the opportunity to partner with the global north, especially in terms of financing, because we are all trying to bring our own natural endowment of biomass as a continent to contribute to solving a global challenge that is actually confronting all of us. And therefore, there's got to be added willingness to contribute to the advancement of bioeconomy on the African continent, with very strong partnership from the global north, with particularly leaning on joint funding initiatives. So that is a very strong recommendation from where I stand. A very strong African voice. Thank you.
Contribute to the advanced bioeconomy at the African continent by the whole world. That's really a hope that we can express, and I think that's a very nice summary of a kind of statement that we can make also in a few weeks in Belém, together with a lot of other comments of today. I promised that the audience could also participate, so may I ask the two persons over there to push on the green button and to ask your question. We propose that you both ask the questions and then the panel can answer.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you to the panelists. My name is Francine from the University of Johannesburg. So my question is around carbon credit. Since we're talking about bioeconomy and sustainability, I think it will be a great platform for me to get clarity onto that topic. I met an entrepreneur who was transforming used oil into biofuel. And by doing so, she was also selling carbon credits. And I went on to research further just to find out that actually that system isn't working, especially for us, Africa as a continent. But most entrepreneurs and people are tapping into that, like selling carbon credits for their green activities, even if that is not enough to replace the damage caused by the biofuel. So my question is this something that we should we should discuss on, like find solution around that system, or look for other sustainable solutions to preserve our resources while also promoting local communities? Thank you.
The second question over there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pamandla Msomi. I'm also from the University of Johannesburg. I think my question is particularly for Dr. Shabalala. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. Okay, so I see that to overcome the issue of sustainable production of metabolites, you guys are cultivating the plants in specific places. So my question to that is that, have you guys looked at the plants in the endemic environment and the plants that you guys are cultivating? Do they both produce the metabolites of interest or the bioactive molecules that you guys are targeting for both pharmaceuticals and also the nutraceuticals? And secondly, we do have a growing body of evidence that the metabolites that we find in plants are not only due to the genetics of the plants, but they are due to both the environment, the soil, and also the microorganisms that exist within those plants. Have you guys looked at the dimension of also perhaps looking at the microorganisms, if they do produce those metabolites that are found in the plants, because in that way you are able to overcome the sustainability issues of the plants. You're also able to overcome the time it takes for the plants to grow to actually have sufficient amounts of those metabolites, and also you're able to overcome the condition of having to harvest a large biomass only to get a small concentration of the metabolites that you require? Or do you guys just use the entire plant? You're not really particularly interested in the active molecules that confer those bioactivities from those plants?
Thank you. Who wants to start about carbon credits? Ben?
No.
Oh.
Suggesting Jane.
Jane? Okay.
Okay, carbon credits are not my favorite topic. Carbon trading and carbon credits actually require additionality. So you have to show that you are storing more carbon all the time. And your measuring, reporting and verification and your registration of your carbon credits can be extremely onerous. It can take a long time to get the promised funding. Where it works, it can work well. Unfortunately, in a country like South Africa, from forestry, for example, you're not going to get carbon credits because we cannot show additionality, because we have limited land. There's 100,000 hectares where we can plant more trees, but because you're constantly harvesting those trees, and we do get recognition for the carbon stored in the products, we can't have it as a carbon project for carbon credits. New Zealand has a successful trading environment for carbon, but it's complicated. And in some respects, Mandy Rombaras, who used to work with Eskom, thinks that carbon credits can potentially generate a lot of funding for Africa. So I'm not going to naysay them. I'm just going to say I don't know enough about it. What I do know is that we can't use them in this country for forestry.
Thank you. Ank?
at high level, in order to promote sustainability, the team of scientists that deal with agricultural research and phytochemistry, they look into all those issues that you raised. So it's not just about us cultivating to have a huge, biomass, but with no, the requisite metabolites or active ingredients inside the plants. So we take care of those issues. But also we try to minimize the use of space by making sure that with the small number of plants that we may have, in those small plants, we should be able to come up with experiments that encourage them to express the phytochemicals that we need to produce the products that we need, including the use of microorganisms, including today we're starting to also use aspects of artificial intelligence and space technology to determine the best places to plant these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With this, I would like to...
Chair, can you please ask this last question? It's pending maybe. Yeah. From the continental determined contribution vision. So as a continent, as I know there's beside the NDCs, the national determined contribution, the continent is hot also. Even the Saudi Arabians, they can try to build another Khalifa. But now our vision as smart cities versus, have we considered building like green cities? Because I think as we are just, the continent is just being took by hyper from that map I last saw there. Would you like to compete with these people? And smart cities, mostly they seem to be people who are getting ready for the next World War III or something. So us as a continent, do you think have we considered another way of sustaining the environment, the climate, by considering the green cities? Yeah, thank you very much, even if it's a comment.
Thank you so much. You want to react on that? Karombi?
Thank you very much. And I think part of what we need to do as this humanity or human species is to find solutions, smart solutions that will encourage the principles of sustainability in all our endeavors. We need sustainable and smart technologies that encourages us to move forward in a society that is recognizing our well-being, our health, but at the same time, in every facet of our lives, if we work on that principle, it means whatever we do, whether we are building bridges, whether we are constructing high industrialized facilities, or whatever we are doing, we should always strive to make sure that we are not making the environment more in a precarious position than what it was. That is why we are now able, as my panelists also alluded to, change waste into a product that we can be able to utilize. Instead of taking a kernel from a fruit where you only take a seed inside to make a product, you utilize the whole package. We are working with various institutions in South Africa, academic institutions, research institutions, where we are able to see people beginning to make very resilient bricks out of a material that you may not even consider to be cement. So that is the kind. I mean, if you build a city out of material that was supposed to have been deposited into as waste, what more can you look for? So it's part of the smart city and package and whatever. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Karumbi. With that, I would like to close the session. So we went through a whole journey. We started with sustainable agriculture, where we mentioned that biotechnology is extremely important to increase the productivity of the biomass. We moved to indigenous knowledge that can also valorize a lot of different products of our biodiversity. And when we spoke about biodiversity, we also see there that if we do it in a sustainable way, we can keep a lot of our biodiversity and create huge amounts of jobs. And then we moved on to the bigger picture of marketing, where we see that we still have a lot of challenges via the so-called biorefineries to valorize either niche products with high added value, either other products that are chemicals that can go into the field of materials, etc. And so this all can keep our system going in an economic way, in a climate-friendly way, in an environmental-friendly way, and create a lot of socio-economic opportunities. Having said that, I would like to ask a final applause for our very nice speakers. And I would like to ask also an applause by the panel to the audience. That was limited, but we always say the cream of the cream. And also the fact that you stayed until 15 minutes later is also very exciting. So thanks a lot. Have a very nice evening, and hope to see you also tomorrow in one of the other sessions. Thanks so much.